much, Jess. Great to hear from Pharaoh. And, well, what a way to end the first day back here for Division A. Game 5. eRa come back and take it. There goes my perfect day of predictions.
Yeah, sucks to be you. Could have been perfect, but he's not there. He's not that great.
He'd never be perfect.
So upset, man. So upset. But in all honesty, though, a great performance from eRa. But if you're eRa, are you kind of kicking yourself about how the day went earlier on against TK? Because you look at TK, obviously they drop a series. They look beatable today. You don't think eRa should have gone 2-0 today?
I mean, they could have if they win game 1, but that doesn't happen. There's no, what ifs. I mean,
True.
They lost to TK, right? And then they play London Docks Hardpoint again, and it was sort of the same story. I mean, they play a good first half, but this lower Docks Hardpoint was really controlled early on by OpTic. It got them back into the game, but yeah, I mean, you had to talk about Bevels. Just didn't have a great performance. It's tough to win hardpoints when you're basically playing 3v4.
Yeah, the expectation that eRa's kind of set up for themselves is, well, originally we talked about there's so much potential if they get better, yada, 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 but we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen the consistency, and for map 1, that was the problem. Just one player, at least, and normally it's either Ricky or Bevels, just isn't going to do overwhelmingly well in the respawns. And Ricky even had a slow start. Like, he massively turned his game around kind of halfway, but ultimately just it didn't matter. OpTic, just 4 players straight across the board, completely outslayed. That was my expectation for the respawns. That's just how I saw it going down. That obviously went completely out the window by map 3.
Yes, it did. But OpTic Gaming started off strong, of course, as you see here in map 1. They close out London Docks Hardpoint as many expected. Then, of course, Joe, talking a little bit about Search and Destroy map 2. Did that one go kind of as you thought?
I mean, it did. I thought OpTic was going to take Forest. I feel like they're a very solid Forest team, but not in the way it kind of happened, right? Like, there was 2 2v4s, which, if you're eRa Eternity, you go back and look at that and say, this, it should be 4-4. It could be 5-3 us. Like, there was a lot of the rounds that eRa Eternity felt like, yeah, they should have won, and this game could have been completely different. But OpTic is a very solid Forest team. And again, just a lot of little mistakes coming out of eRa, which we typically don't see in Search and Destroy.
Karma, by the way, had pretty nasty performances. That early 2-piece is one of the things that kind of set the tone, but I think we even saw on Texas, OpTic does have a pretty decent clutch ability. They had like 3 different 2v4s. The problem for them is like first bloods and just like converting on it, right? Yeah. They had wonderful opportunities here and there. Forma looked decent with the sniper, at least ever so briefly, but yeah, Forest is just kind of a map where I think the better team can just kind of steamroll and run somebody over. Like LG has been fantastic like that through Division B, where they just run teams over. They don't do anything fancy. It's just you take the gunfights and you win them. So you don't really see those individual monster performances. It's just the better team, it looks like, wins.
Yeah, I think that's it. Is, OpTic, they don't do a lot of fancy strategies. They just sort of overtake a bomb site. Typically, it is this B site. Not too much A pressure. There were some like pretty solid rounds, out of Pharaoh and eRa, but for the most part, OpTic controlled it. Again, there was those 2 4v2s. Karma had a great game, so it's a solid performance overall for OpTic. They go up 2-0, and you're thinking this series is all but over.
And I will say, I think a point of improvement for eRa to make is just individually they need to play their lives better. Like, it seems like we've seen 2 Surge maps where everything just goes wonderfully for them and they steamroll. And then we've seen 2 maps where there's a lot of potential, but then they just try to make hero plays, they throw away their lives, they individually try to do too much, and they just don't stay alive and survive. Like, there's a clip in here somewhere where, like, Pharaoh gets a kill, and then he just YOLO sprints through mid-map, completely wide peeks the fire tank, and just gets gunned down. Like, all it takes is, like, a nice little shoulder peek here and there just to gain information. So I think little things that eRa could do quite a bit better, and I think they'll see noticeable improvements, but again, it just seems like they're 50-50 in Search. Like, it's a wild difference.
And it's weird because you would expect that team to be a little bit more consistent in Search and Destroy, considering the players they have on the roster. But that kind of, to your point, their chance was similar to what we saw in the first 2 weeks. It was the same kind of critique, if you will, Joe.
It's the same thing, and I've talked about it a lot. When you're on defense, you have numbers, whether it's a 4v3 or a 3v2. You can let them plant the bomb. Right. The round is not over. There's no reason, again, OpTic doesn't win if they plant it, right? You can retake that bomb site with those numbers. I thought the 4v2s were a great example, especially that last round. But yeah, then we go over to CTF, and Well, Pharaoh had some strong words to say. He's like, this was basically a pub for me, which, all right. That's some strong words to say when you're, you know, sort of at the bottom of the table, I guess you'll say. But, hey, man, eRa looked great in Flag Tower, as we see. They beat TK and OpTic today. And
Ricky was a beast. I think he full doubled up on streaks twice, and it's not like he was just scraping by, barely getting the Glide Bomb. Like, full double streaks. Pharaoh obviously had a nasty performance as well, but I think ultimately for OpTic, it was a slow start. They gave up streaks that just, like, it snowballed out of control, and they just gave up more and more. No. Incredibly surprising as well. Like, you know, eRa played TK, but they played TK close on it. Yes, they won, but the 5-0 beatdown, that was insane. And more importantly for them, and this is definitely a very great silver lining on top of the 5-0 win, is all 4 players played incredibly well, and that's something you'd like to see in the respawn. If all 4 players on point, we've been talking about how good eRa can be. There's an example of it for the CTF. Yeah,
even the first 2 weeks, like, who was that third player that typically stepped up and captured the flag? It was Bevels, and Bevels had another solid game 3, and that's when they put results on the board.
Well, at that point, of course, the start of the reverse sweep does occur. We head over to game 4, and obviously the players themselves said, yeah, we were expecting like a 3-1 kind of result, but OpTic, they thought it was going to be the search and destroy. It turns out it was the CTF, and it felt as if eRa maybe just got a little bit of momentum from that capture the flag game and transitioned it straight to a hard point.
And it was insane. I mean, you talk about momentum. Ricky just, again, didn't have the greatest game number 1, kind of turned it around a little bit, but like by the time game 4 came around, he was cooking. And then Decimate, you can see right here, isn't like, he's having a solid game, a lot of hill time, but not overwhelming in terms of engagements or kills. But he's the player that massively stepped up towards the end, where he gets the fighter pilot, uses that to get the Glide Bomb, gets killed the Glide Bomb, then gets information on a team, and then turns into the artillery, yada, 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 so on and so forth. But yeah, solid performances again all the way around. Bevels, like, he didn't have the best of games, but that's the game you want your role player to have right there. Like, if you have a player that's generally speaking going to go negative, and every team does have one because that's kind of how it works, close games like that is a very solid performance all the way across the board. So great performances, great massive moments for eRa. They just completely blew my expectations out of the water for that hard point.
Yeah, and that artillery comes in on this last parking lot hill, and you know, it opened things up. OpTic wasn't getting time, but you got a little bit worried there. But Bevels makes a great play down the middle of the street. He was able to catch 1 player off guard. That allows Pharaoh to get 2, and really, I mean, that allowed them to close out the map. Winery just full controlled out of eRa, but the big surprise to me was, again, the OpTic slaying. Like, you know, Krim has a .97 and he has the most kills. Like, that slaying power just wasn't there from all 4 players. We don't see that too often.
Very rare. Very rare, that's for sure.
Not a good sign.
Yeah, definitely not. Of course, at that point, we're heading over to game 5, USS Texas. Going into it, I was kind of with Phil. You heard Phil say it as the map was loading in. No, I still think that this should go in favor of OpTic Gaming. Considering everything that we've seen about eRa Eternity on USS Texas, they were very hit and miss on it. But when push came to shove, even though it got close chance, they still closed it out.
Well, interestingly enough, we've actually seen eRa play against OpTic, and it was Pharaoh that had an incredible performance. But the community kind of decided that, like, well, it's only because of the duelist pistols. And it's that top-level analysis that you like to see collectively of, like, well, clearly Pharaoh's not a great S&D player. Like, we'll ignore every single game we've seen him play on land. He's not actually that great, except for all of his games in Search are really good, and then he did as well in this map as he had in the past. So, again, sometimes we get a little bit reactionary with our analysis sometimes, but yeah, I mean, eRa did it once. Why not able to do it again? I mean, collectively, the First Bloods went ever so slightly in their favor. Yes, they did give up a 2v4. Yes, OpTic had some disgusting clutches on board, but they found themselves down 5-1. Like, what can you do?
This round's so unfortunate. Krim with 2 team kills and then shot in the back. Not the way you want to try and make that 5-1 comeback, Joe.
Now, you get 2 team kills, you finish the map 3-9. I think Krim's definitely, you know what, I'm going to try and forget about this game as quickly as possible. Again, like, depending on how Vitality, eRa, Mindfreak play, this is what we can expect every single match, right? Like, Division B, we love watching every game because we don't know. There's so much star power.
Could go either way.
Could go either way.
Right.
For a while there, it was, all right, eRa's going to lose, Mindfreak's going to lose, Vitality's going to lose. But now it seems, you know, Mindfreak's really stepped it up. eRa, they get to a Game 5 versus TK. They beat OpTic Gaming.
Vitality?
This, you know, well, yeah.